Hey everybody, welcome to Comedy on Vinyl. This week we have a very special episode. I guess they're all special in their own way, but not every week do we have Brian Stack on the show. And Brian Stack is generally awesome, but he is a writer, has been writing for every Conan O'Brien TV show since 1997. He's a performer. He's created some of the greatest characters you've ever seen on late night TV. He also brings to Comedy on Vinyl a first, in that we're not doing a comedy album this week now. I can hear those people out there saying, Jason, this is a comedy podcast. This is called Comedy on Vinyl. How can you do an album that's not a comedy album? Well, to be fair, when a man like Brian Stack says that this album influenced me comedically, you don't really question it. It becomes legitimate right then and there. Anything that inspires somebody to be funny or helps somebody deal with a situation with a sense of humor, it influences their sense of humor, and there's no doubt some of the greatest music I've ever listened to has also been very funny. It doesn't have to be a comedian making it for it to be comedy, or for it to influence your comedy. Either way, that's a long-winded way of saying that's what we're doing. So, also, I just wanted to very quickly make sure to plug that Brian Stack has a bunch of shows here in Los Angeles. He does Gravid Water at the UCB Theater here in LA, first Sunday of every month, and he also does Joel Murray and Friends at IO West, which is every other Thursday. The next show coming up as of this recording is Thursday, March 15th. Check that out. He also wanted to let us know that there are some Chicago shows coming up for Conan in 2012, so go to teamcoco.com, get your tickets for that. I do have one plug besides a drinking game, which I am in every month. Go to adrinkinggame.com, and if you're here in Los Angeles, get tickets. It's BYOB. You come to a black box theater and watch me and a bunch of my friends get drunk and act out 80s movies. This month is going to be Die Hard, and I'm going to be Hans Gruber. It's going to be a great show. We do this every month. We pick an 80s film. We drink. The audience drinks. And it's a whole hell of a lot of fun. And then one final plug, that is Lords of Soaptown, which is my documentary. I am fundraising, just trying to raise $5,000 to complete it. So if you would, go over to Indiegogo.com, search for Lords of Soaptown, or search for Lords of Soaptown on Facebook. You can connect with us there, and then go right to the Indiegogo page from there, and donate whatever you can. We're just trying to complete it. We've got about a little over 3 weeks left to raise the $5,000 to complete this documentary that I've been working on for 4 years now. It's about freestyle walking, and if you don't know what that is, it's a very strange sport. It's like parkour, but with no discipline. And you can also go to lordsofsoaptown.com. I guess that's another way to do it. So, yeah, check that out, and if you would, please donate. Again, don't forget to subscribe to us, rate us highly, and, yeah, please enjoy this episode. Glad to have Mike Worden back. He'll be coming back regularly, and very happy, of course, to have Brian Stack. And big thank you to Brian Stack for biking it all the way over here. Thanks so much, and enjoy this episode. All right, everybody, thank you for coming to Comedy on Vinyl. This week, we are talking about The Replacements' Let It Be, and our special guest this week is Brian Stack.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's good to have you here, and obviously Mike's here.
Hi.
I guess it's not obvious. You're not here all the time.
I'm not here all the time. I know. This is your flaking out. I'm done. I'll be here more now.
Okay. Since this is your equipment, I think it's more of an investment for you.
I was studying for the LSAT for the people out there because I'm thinking about going to law school. Yeah, I'm thinking about
for entertainment law.
Digging myself deeper in debt. I don't think that $100,000 in student loan is enough. So I really want to. Clearly not. I'm hoping to get more.
So let's talk about why you wanted to talk about this album, Brian, because obviously this is the first non-comedy album besides the Poco album for the Phil Hartman that we ever brought up. So.
Yeah, first of all, I have to kind of apologize because I wanted to pick a comedy album, but most of the ones that really meant a lot to me have already been picked, like Let's Get Small and Weird Al and The Ruddles and Monty Python and Bill Cosby. And to be honest, when I was growing up, most of my comedy obsession was more directed at TV and movies.
Sure.
And I did listen to some comedy albums, but I wasn't like some of my friends who still have this enormous collection of comedy vinyl. So, but the Replacements' Let It Be occurred to me largely because I think I discovered it around the time I was starting out in comedy, like to really start performing, and I related to this the attitude and the self-deprecation of it, and the kind of the way they seemed to feel like they were doing it just for fun, and there was a lot of but they also were. They felt pretty lost. Like I felt really lost and directionless at that time, you know. So I related to a lot of the humor in the music. It's also a lot of the songs are a mixture of funny and sad. Like Paul Westerberg said, I guess you could say we're a sloppy rock and roll band that tries to straddle the line between comedy and tragedy. And that's very true of a lot of my favorite comedy stuff, too. A lot of my favorite comedy movies and shows. And, like, I was just rewatching Party Down recently, and I was like, oh, this is almost like a Replacements record, because it's like that mixture of just heartbreaking, tear your heart out moments with hilarious moments, you know, and or movies like Grosse Pointe Blank or Billy Wilder's The Apartment. You know, that mixture of funny and sad is always, or Paddy Chayefsky, the dark and the light. You know? I've always found that some of the comedy I admire most, and that's true in music too, I think.
It'd be hard to make an album that was a mix of both without people assuming it was serious first anyway. So, like, if the Replacements had gone out of their way and said, you know, we're a comedy group, but we also, like, you know, we mix some drama in. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't really, nobody's going to consider that a comedy album. They're just going to be, oh, this is a serious rock album. You know?
Right, exactly.
I don't think there's a lot of people. The same with, even like They Might Be Giants, who are probably my favorite group that is still kind of, you know, hilarious. You know, they're still a music group.
And they have a song called "We're the Replacements," by the way, which is about them.
That's right.
and yeah, I think it's. I often found even the liner notes the Replacements were right would make me laugh. Like on their first album, which is called "Sorry Ma, Forgot to Take Out the Trash." Even the title's funny. But like one of the liner notes was, for one song, was written 20 minutes after we recorded it. You know? So that kind of self-deprecation, not taking yourself seriously.
Yeah. You don't get a lot of that in the punk field. It seems like a lot of punk bands take themselves way too seriously, I've found.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons the Replacements used to kind of get in trouble with punk audiences is they would deliberately, like, they'd go out, if they saw Mohawks, they would start playing country songs. And then if they were, you know, they just like to just make themselves laugh, and often at their own expense. And I always admired that, but also there was a part of me that was like, oh, they could have been bigger if they'd played the game more. But one of the reasons you love them is that they didn't, you know?
Sure.
It's like a lot of your favorite comedians that you're like, oh, more people should know about him. It'd be, you know, the Bill Hicks type guys who they just didn't have it in them to kind of, you know, play the game or whatever.
That's so funny. Mike, you were saying you've listened to more of Westberg's stuff,
Westberg's later stuff, yeah. I came into, I think it's called Eventually or something. I don't remember his album. It was a 1996 album, was the first I'd heard of him before I'd heard of the Replacements. And I really loved that album. And that took me into The Cure, because I hadn't even heard of The Cure at that time.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that really,
it took me sheltered, upstate New York.
Yeah.
I was very sheltered, too. I didn't hear real alternative music until I got to Madison for grad school, because I grew up listening. I used to think, well, if anything's worth hearing, I'll hear it on the radio.
Right.
I was naive enough to think, so, I mean, I still love the Beatles and the Stones and all that stuff, but that's really, I never heard anything. I remember the first time I heard God Save the Queen by the Sex Pistols, it was like 10 years after it came out, and I remember thinking it was just going to sound like noise, like a, like literally like an explode, like just an unlistenable, and I remember just thinking, this is just a great rock song.
Yeah.
And it actually surprised me, you know.
What's your history with comedy? I mean, I've read up on you enough to know where you went to school, and I know when you started on Conan. That's about the time I actually started watching the show. You know, so back in late night. But you just, I don't know. Just if you could just give us a breakdown.
Sure. Well, I always was a huge comedy fan, but I never thought I'd ever work up the guts to do it myself. Even until after college. Like I used to go see my friend's improv group in college, and he would say, "You want to come audition?" And I just never had the guts to do it. But I was so mad at myself for chickening out that when he told me about Improv Olympic in Chicago, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try it. If it doesn't work, at least I'll know I tried it. And so I started doing improv right after college, and I went up to Madison, Wisconsin for grad school, and that's where I first started performing at this little theater called The Arc. And one of the guys I worked with, Todd Hansen, was one of the original Onion writers, and Chris Farley was in that group, and it was a really wonderful little theater we didn't get much of an audience, but it was, and the building's a laundromat now, but it was a nice little theater. And then after finishing grad school, I went back to Chicago, started doing the Improv Olympic, and worked in that agency for a few years, did improv at night and on weekends, and then got hired at Second City. Mm-hmm. Worked at Second City for 4 years. That was a great experience, and that was my first professional experience, even though we didn't make much. Mm-hmm. And then I got hired at Conan in '97. So
that's just crazy. Because it sounds to me like, you know, when you start out, I'm the same way. I can't perform for crap. I do it once a month, but I can't do I just can't do it. So I understand the fright, but I don't understand the getting over it part.
Oh.
You know?
Well, no one was more scared than me. That's for sure. I was like. And I still, I could never even imagine doing stand-up. Even though I admire it tremendously, they used to even poke fun at me at Second City if I had to go out and talk to the audience as myself. Mm-hmm. I could go out there in character, no problem. But if I had to go out there and just say, if they said, just go out and stall, stall, we're getting our costumes on or something, I would just... I would be like, oh, please. So I admired stand-ups tremendously. I don't know how they do it. And,
I feel the same way. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've done all the classes at UCB. I've seen you perform at UCB a bunch with ASCAT and stuff. Oh. Yeah. So but I couldn't understand stand-up. I love stand-up, and I'm a stand-up nerd, and I listen to it every chance I get. Yeah. But, to do it to me, it just... I couldn't do it. It's make me laugh, funny boys.
Right.
With improv, even the best improv to me... It can be if it's not really hitting and the group knows it's working, that's fine. It works, just like a good song. Just like a song. Hey, if you're standing there playing with a band and no one's dancing, but you know it's a good song, you don't need everyone dancing. You know you're still entertaining people as long as they're engaged, as long as you keep them engaged. But with stand-up, a lot of times you don't have that luxury. You need a laugh every 15 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever it is.
Yeah.
As far as, I know this is well-trod territory, but, the parallels between music and comedy, rhythms of music and comedy, has there ever been anything, I don't know my question is, except other than, have you, Mike or Brian, have either of you ever sort of noticed, your best comedy or your favorite comedy having a musical?
Yeah, there is a real rhythm to, and it's funny, too, because one of the funniest guys in the world to me is John Wurster, who's also happens to be one of the best drummers in the world. And it's I've often found, whether it's Keith Moon, Ringo Starr, there tend to be a lot of... Conan's a really good drummer, there's something about having a sense of rhythm, and I think there's a rhythm to the way a line comes out, and oftentimes, one little beat is off and the laugh goes away, and you can't quite figure out why, but I think there is a real relationship, I think, between rhythm and music and comedy, I think.
I know Mel Brooks was a drummer, so he always...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He's talked about that a lot. He was very deliberate about how his comedy, he wanted it to be musical, and, the rim shot, though he didn't invent it, seems to be his savior.
I didn't know he played drums. But I guess Seinfeld plays drums. A lot of... there seems to be a real relationship there.
Do you play music? Have you played music, or do you just...
I mess around on guitar. I never got advanced with it, but I love to play. Just mess around, and I'm always drumming nervously, even though I just have a little practice drum kit. I never learned how to really play the drums well, but I'm always. It's just people in the office. That's one of my nervous habits. It's just but that's more just anxiety than a musical drive.
Open wide, a doctor's here, everything is fine, got nothing to fear, strap them down, alright I guess, stop your bawling, you little brat, get this over with, I see up in an hour, didn't want to shove me yesterday, I took a shower, get this over with, I see up in an hour, I can't last running, rip it, run my mouth, rip it,
that's man. I guess that'd be a deep well to jump into. Not anything in comedy. I mean, I at least I know my whole family's got OCD, and I guess I'm the only one who turned that into comedy. But what about you, Mike? Just out of curiosity, anxiety wise, I like to.
I'm on the opposite with. I don't know. I don't do that. I'm performing though. For me, like when I'm doing improv or when I'm doing even a theater play or musical or anything like that, even playing with my band or whatever, it's like. I want to be out there. I need to. I want to be on stage. I want to be in front of everybody so much. And it's weird that the one aspect, like stand-up, I could never do. It's the one thing that scares me, which maybe why I should try to do it sometime just to get over that.
You should do it.
I know.
That'd be fun. I'd watch it. And not to watch you bomb. I think
right.
I know the grin looks like I would want you to bomb.
But I love it. And my father was a drummer. He's one of the funniest people I've ever met. That's where a lot of he introduced me to most of the comedy stuff I listened to. He was a drummer, and I play piano, and I play a bunch of instruments too. But I think that you see a lot of that crossover with everyone says every comedian wants to be a rock star, and every rock star wants to be a comedian.
Sure, yeah.
That's really true. It's funny too, because I like Jack White, from the White Stripes. Conan did a White Stripes video, and he said he wanted to talk to Jack White about guitars and the blues, and Jack White's like, but in the Monorail episode, and he said he was just a big comedy nerd, like he just was really obsessed with details about Simpsons, and I've often found with a lot of our guests, I'm amazed at the obscure bits they know about, or the like John Mayer brought up a bit we did 7 years before that was about tea copywriters having a cage match, and it was I'm like, seriously, you remember? Because it was a bit I had loved that Glazer and McCann had done, and I'm like, oh man, he remembers some of our favorite stuff, and it was not recurring bits, just really weird, obscure stuff that you love, and there's a lot of musicians that seem to be comedy
You're
fans.
seeing that a lot in SNL, I think, even. A lot of the best hosts nowadays are musicians who cross over to host.
Sure. Michael Bublé was
Michael Bublé was great, and he was in sketches before when he was just a musical guest.
Yeah.
I think you're seeing that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a confidence in rhythm and a confidence in melody that maybe you kind of need to carry you through. Here's my song, I get to do my song, I get to carry it from beginning to end. I think if you're out there doing improv and in your head you've got a rhythm or you've got a melody, you've got a thing to play out. They're very similar. Yeah.
There's a skill set there with a lot of the front men in bands and stuff. When I was playing with my band, every single night that you're playing, there's downtime in between songs that you need to be working with the audience. You need to be talking with them. And being so serious is it's just draining. This next song's about death, and we're, so you just make people laugh. You're cracking. So I think it's a skill that's learned while they're on stage that they might not even know. A lot of musicians don't know that they're really developing that skill.
Sure,
but they are.
I often find too that a lot of the funniest people write the best sad songs too, like Bob Dylan or Westerberg or Elvis Costello or Steve Earle, or these people that it takes a really good sense of humor to write a song that has some gray area to it, I think, and that's one of the reasons I think Westerberg's songs with the Replacements are so powerful to me, is they just that mixture of funny and sad, and but there's always humor underneath it. Even there's no serious kind of ponderous, sort of like.
There's nothing pretentious about it.
No, not at all. I don't think they had a pretentious bone in their body.
Right. Is there anything that you've written that where you can sort of feel this album in it, coming out?
Well, it's funny because I don't know why this is, but a lot of the stuff I was drawn to write, at Conan and stuff, often had this mixture of, a lot of the characters I would play would be gleefully moving forward despite their horrible lives. I did a character called the Interrupter, where but basically he's super upbeat, but everything he's describing about his life, like living in a dumpster behind the Port Authority bus terminal, or having 7 different types of hepatitis, and so there's always this, or the Ghost Crooner character I did, he's singing about horrible things, but it's that sort of everything's fine, sort of attitude mixed with the dark stuff, and I think that's something I've always been drawn to as a viewer and as a writer, just stuff that mixes those two things. It's probably, I think a lot of the things that horrify me in real life, I when they're dealt with in the abstract in comedy, it's my way of almost making them less scary or less disturbing. Where it's like, oh, that's how I'll deal with it. I'll just confront it head on and just write a stupid joke about it. You know.
Well, I'm trying to, I guess I just ask this straightforward question to you, and I'll stick with the album, but I just want to know what it's like to write comedy every day. I try, but I don't get to do it professionally.
It's weird because I'm grateful for the opportunity to do it, even though there are days where you're just like, oh wow, I don't feel like I'm just, the blarney's not flowing, and you just start, there's just nothing coming, and you hope someone else has an idea that day, and or you hope you can help with their idea, but it's amazing because, like, I remember Peter Buck from REM saying, that they would get together every day to write songs with REM, but some days nothing was coming, and other days they'd write 5 songs, and you don't know when it's going to happen, and so there are days where I'm just like, oh, I hope no one's even watching tonight. But you always hope someone else has got it flowing that day if you don't, and or you hope you can at least kind of help tweak someone else's idea, or at least support them and help them deliver what they have in mind. But there are days, where everybody's just feels like they're just got tumbleweeds going through their brain.
I mean, I guess that's the creative way. I suppose the highs and lows are what... The lows are what make the highs so incredibly satisfying.
That's true. Without the lows, you don't get the thrill of when stuff works. It's like, then it's special, And that's true. It's same with improv or music. Like, it's like if you know in advance it's going to work, there's no thrill. It's like skydiving. If you feel like you have to start doing more flips so that it feels a little more exciting or uncertain if you're even going to land. I think that's without the possibility of total disaster. There's no feeling of triumph.
Well, I mean, and I'm just saying, just from watching the show for as long as I've been watching it, I don't know what it is about the way you guys keep the show together, because there are times when Conan hates a joke or doesn't care to deliver it the way it was intended, where he's just having fun with the material written down. But I don't know, you guys managed to... God, I envy that. Like, there's something about, like, a well-oiled machine like that, where even if all the material doesn't work, the show still works as a whole.
Oh, I hope so.
Got an interesting guest. There's so many guests I don't care to watch, but I'll still watch it just to see what Conan does with them, or maybe the sketches you've written around them, or what have you,
Yeah, hopefully, we always hope that there's at least something, entertaining to be pulled even from something that isn't working. And sometimes stuff that doesn't work, Conan manages to, like you said, still pull some humor out of it. And he's such a brilliant writer, obviously, and like I think that's what got him through even the early days when he was really green as a performer. His writer instincts were always so dead on. I mean, his understanding for what will work is really, really impressive. Like I've rarely seen him ever be wrong when it comes to instincts for what people are going to go for.
Sure.
Some days we don't give him a lot of options and we have to just do what we have. But and he often improves things at rehearsal with his own ideas, and he's a great writer, obviously.
Are you guys more comfortable at TBS, or is it more? Is it freeing? Are there less constraints or no?
It's definitely more comfortable than the Tonight Show was. The Tonight Show felt just too big to me. Like the studio was too big, the show felt too big. In all fairness, I think some of the restrictions we put on ourselves because we were going in going, well, I don't know if you can do this at the Tonight Show, can you? And we never thought about that kind of stuff at late night.
Sure.
I never remember once wondering, can we do this at late night? At late night, it was always, do we think this is funny? And if we think it's funny, and we were sometimes very wrong about that, but we would throw it out there. It was almost like being up in the attic playing around, and it's like, but the TBS executives have been incredibly supportive, and they don't interfere, but they're there to help and support. And if you saw them walking around, you wouldn't even think they were executives. They're very laid back, and
awesome.
So that's been nice. And they're very happy to have Conan at TBS, which has been nice because I think they like having an original late night talk show on their network. So it's definitely been more comfortable. I miss a lot of the kind of stuff we used to do at late night, the more silly character stuff. But we still do some. We still slip some in there. But it's less like you're less likely to see a prospector come, digging in the stairs with his pick, saying, "I'm digging for comedy," or whatever. We often joke about bringing out a prospector rehearsal just to see Conan's reaction. Because it's just, that was 10 years ago. We don't do that anymore. But I do miss a lot of the really silly character stuff.
Sure.
But luckily, we do still get some in there.
Let's go back, because I try to ask people about their experiences with comedy on vinyl in general. Again, we'll get back to the album, but at least for me and Mike have both talked about this. Mike's talked about discovering his parents' comedy albums in the attic. They were hiding them away from him. And then I remember my parents giving me mine and sitting down just listening with my best friend and just discovering comedy as a sort of you're kind of in this bubble with you and the content, you and maybe another person. Did you have any experiences with comedy like that?
I did, although... like I said, I did have some albums, and I remember my dad had the Best of Bill Cosby with Noah and everything.
Yeah,
and Button Down Mind of Bob Newhart and all that stuff. And I grew up loving I got introduced to a lot of stuff more through the TV stuff than records, but I did hear the records. But as a family, we used to watch the Bob Newhart Show, Mary Tyler Moore Show, Carol Burnett Show, and back when you had to just be home to watch that stuff.
Right.
And so it was very... it was kind of like almost if I didn't have a big brother or sister, but it almost felt like they were the way a big brother would pass on a record to you.
Yeah.
Go, hey, check this out. That's kind of how my parents were with a lot of that stuff.
That's awesome.
And I used to, before we had a VCR, this is how old I am, I used to, on audio cassette, record shows. So I was almost like listening to comedy on vinyl, even though I was listening to maybe a Faulty Towers episode or an SNL episode. I remember an SNL with Steve Martin that I could recite word for word from audio. I didn't have none of the visuals.
Yeah.
But I could remember it was the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band one, and I remember it might as well have been an album.
Yeah.
And,
I used to do the same thing. I used to take that. I loved the fake commercials, the SNL fake commercials. So I would record them all at night on VHS, and then in the morning, on Sunday mornings, I would take a bunch of tapes and then find the commercials, and then sit there with my boombox and hit record, so I could take it to school and everyone could listen to it.
Oh, that's
and I'd
great.
acting it out. And at this point, they pour gravy on themselves. That's why people are laughing.
Yeah, I remember a kid in my English class in high school going, if you studied this stuff as much as you studied these Monty Python tapes, you'd probably do better in this class. And I remember going, yeah, that's true, but you're right, but who cares?
So, comedy, at least as we're discovering, the younger our guests get, the more I'm realizing a few of them, there are a couple of potential guests who might have come on, but really won't, because I didn't really ever listen to comedy albums, and that kind of blows my mind, and then makes me feel old. And did you have anybody that you got to bond with over that stuff, or was it just a you experience?
I definitely had, friends who loved comedy as much as I did, but I don't think it compared to the bond I felt once I started doing improv and working. It's almost like Del Close, the improv guru in Chicago, used to call it finding your tribe. Like when you find these people where you're like, as corny as it sounds, it's almost like that girl in the bee costume in the Blind Melon video. Where it's like you find these people and you're like, oh, these people are they're obsessively into the same stuff I'm into.
Right.
And you also memorized these old routines of Nichols and May or whatever. And I thought I was such a weirdo. And so I had friends who loved comedy a lot, but I don't think I met people who were as hardcore into it as I did until I started really performing and getting involved with Improv Olympic and stuff, and where you're like, oh, there's countless people like me. You know?
Yeah, that's a great venue. I lived in Chicago for only 2 years, but for the little time I was there, I got to see a lot of stuff. And I think it was mostly there. A friend of mine worked like the box office at the time, so I got to see like a bunch. John Lutz, who's on.
I love John.
Now. He's so hilarious.
He makes me break on stage as much as anyone has.
Really?
I did a lot of ass cat shows with him in New York, and I just love the guy. And his ability to commit to his characters. You don't get this on 30 Rock. He's basically just seems like himself, and he's great. But he does wonderful characters, and he's a great improviser.
I just love the weird perverted turns they give his character, though. When he does seem like a normal guy, but then all of a sudden he's just a weird creep.
Right. Yeah, and his wife Sue Galloway is often on the show too. She's the Dutch writer, you know.
Let's get back to the album then at hand, because I don't want to miss anything. What are your favorite tracks on it?
You know, I love the whole album. I think if I had to pick one favorite track, it might be Unsatisfied, but it's hard to narrow it down. And like I said, the mixture of funny and sad, and also sometimes in the same line, like in I Will Dare, where he sings, ain't lost yet, so I gotta be a winner, bacon and cigarettes, a lousy dinner. And it's just the idea of like, he's sounding optimistic, but he's also saying, I just had bacon and cigarettes for dinner. Right. My life isn't really that good. Or I think it's that, the combination of sometimes just silly juvenile songs, like Tommy Gets His Tonsils Out.
Yeah.
You know, the orthodontist saying, get this over with, I tee off in an hour. You know, it's basically just, but then like the songs like 16 Blue are as true and relatable to any kid who's ever been 16. It's just how you're totally clueless. You're pretending, you're telling your dad you have a date when you don't. And then that guitar solo at the end of 16 Blue is maybe my all-time favorite guitar solo, even though there's like 3 notes in it.
Right.
But it sums up that feeling of being 16 and feeling lost and feeling like you're the only one who feels this way. And you're like, when, I think, like Lou Reed said, a lot of his songs, his goal was just to make people feel like they're not alone. And I think that when I would listen to a lot of the Replacement songs, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of people that relate to these songs that thought they were the only one that felt that way.
Yeah.
And that goes for the funny stuff and the sad stuff. I think.
Is there any comedy that's ever done sort of the same thing for you? Because you're making me think now. I mean, there's a lot of really funny music. Like my favorite bands are, like I said, they might be Giants. XTC is one of my favorite bands, and they both have a lot of comedic. They're comedic elements to their music, but I really relate to the music, and that music will really flash me back to a certain part of my life. And I'm trying to think if there's any comedy that does. For me, it feels like comedy's just like, if it's funny, it's consistently funny, and I'm finding something new in it, and it doesn't necessarily flash me back. I don't know if there's any comedy that flashes either you guys back to a certain time in your life or not.
It's I think when the things like Steve Martin's, like the stuff on record takes me back, because that's something he moved on from. So I still think of that as something that was part of his career in the past when I was a kid. And so, or Richard Pryor, I think he's still to this day, I think if you watch that live in concert, I think Pauline Kael, the critic, said that was the single greatest one-person performance ever put on film, and I can't really argue with that. It was just amazing. And so sometimes when I see some of that stuff, it does take me back, or when I see early SNL or SCTV, like, it's amazing on YouTube. I just recently saw Martin Short doing the scenes from An Idiot's Marriage from SCTV. It was a combination of Jerry Lewis and Ingmar Bergman. And bits like that just meant so much to me as a kid, and I watch them today, and it just takes me back to that feeling of discovering it and feeling like it was almost written just for you. Even though it wasn't. But you could tell they were really trying to make themselves laugh too. That you'd see that in the Muppet Show or in Bullwinkle too, where you're like, wait, I think these people were doing this for themselves and hoping other people would find it funny, but and that's been true of a lot of my favorite comedy. Is what you can tell the people making it really loved it, and like two of my friends who created Eagleheart, that also, and that's how I feel every time I watch Eagleheart. It's like, oh, Michael and Andrew and Jason Wallner, they're just they're making themselves laugh first, and then kind of hoping people will come along for the ride,
Right, yeah.
And it's great for that reason.
And actually now that you say that, now I'm thinking about it, like watching The Simpsons, I guess because I take The Simpsons for granted because it's been around now for 500 friggin' episodes, I think like all the early Simpsons flash me back to A, when my parents wouldn't let me watch it, and B, when they finally gave up. And then, honestly, late night, like, there are a few clips you can find on YouTube where I can sit and watch. I'm like, oh shit, I remember staying up until all fucking hours when I was 16. Finally realizing that because it took me so long. When I was 13 is when the show came on, originally. And because I loved Dave so much, I hated it. So I was like, no, I'm not going to watch it. So I refused to watch it. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be open-minded. I'm 16. I'm going to be open-minded. I'm going to watch some of the show. Maybe it's good. The first thing I see is an ostrich pooping presents onto the audience.
Oh, yeah, Dino Stamatopoulos, Yeah, Dino's, what a writer he is.
He's going to be on the show soon at some point, too. We're trying to get him on, although I'm afraid he might bite my face off.
He's a really sweet guy. But I was... when I first met Dino, I was like, because he had such an original mind and stuff, I was like intimidated by him. But he's a great guy, real easygoing, nice to talk to. Definitely one of a kind.
Yeah.
Here comes Dick, he's wearing a skirt. Here comes Jane, you know she's sporting a chain. Same hair evolution, same build evolution. Tomorrow who's gonna fuss? And they love each other so androgynous. Closer than you know, love each other so androgynous. Don't get him wrong, don't get him mad. He might be a father, but he sure ain't a dad. And she don't need advice that is sent to her. She's happy the way she looks, she's happy with her gender. And they love each other so androgynous.
I just think, when I think, like I said, that's the first thing I watched. I'm like, I can't watch this. I don't get it. And then, I'm going to try it again. I think I missed something. And it turns out I did. And it's like exactly what you're talking about. It felt like somebody was making something to test me. Like, you know what? I want to see if you get this. And I sat and I'm like, there's not that much to get. It's just ridiculous. And they that's all they want. They want to do something that just tickles a part of your brain that no one else was tickling at the time, it felt like.
That's how I felt when I would see it too. It's just like, plus their ability to, like, I really salute the early Conan writers like Louis and Dino and Robert and those guys, because they really did need to reinvent it and not make it like Letterman's show, and that's a really tall order, trying to create an all new voice for a show, and I think they pulled it off. Even though they had a rough ride early on, I think they laid that kind of foundation for us, and I was lucky enough to come in with it already there, you know. And, And but yeah, that must have been a rough ride early on, trying to come up with a whole new voice, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
I was thinking about what you said, about how like sometimes you're watching something, and a group of people around you sometimes aren't laughing, but you're the one, you're going crazy. And for me, I come from a very cerebral, like I try to like. It's horrible when someone doesn't get it. I want to explain why why don't you get it? And sometimes you can't. No. It's like wonderful. It's like, it's funny. You see how crazy it is? It's just funny. Why don't you get that it's funny?
Yeah. I remember being the only person in the movie theater literally falling out of my chair, crying with laughter in Spinal Tap when the little dwarves were dancing around the little Stonehenge. And I was laughing so hard, and then I realized to my embarrassment that I was literally the only person laughing at that. And I was like, what? And I wasn't thinking that they were wrong and I was right, but I just couldn't understand why they didn't feel the same way I did.
That's insane.
I just and so but I think we've had moments like that at the show too, where it's one of those moments where it's like, oh, this is something comedy writers appreciate, but the audience didn't go for it all. Like,
Right.
and you can't say, well, they're wrong and we're right.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes you get all uppity about it and stuff, but you realize it's just so subjective, and
Sure.
you know.
But I guess that's the wonder of it, because no matter what, you know that if you find it funny, there's probably somebody out there who's like, why the fuck aren't they laughing? You know?
Exactly. Well, Tommy Blancha, who used to write at our show, he did a bit that Dino wrote called Cutie O'Gigglins. Who is this? He was a guy dressed like Little Lord Fauntleroy, had a big lollipop, and everything he said was super cute. So it's like, what'd you have for breakfast? He said, a bowl of giggles. Or a bowl of smiles. And Tommy said no one was laughing, except one woman in the back who was laughing as hard as he's ever heard anyone laugh. And he said he wanted to marry her. You know, but I think sometimes I like to think we do something for those people out there like that. There's enough of them out there that you like to think, well, hopefully they're appreciating it. You know, Rick Moranis said to Conan once that if they'd had a live audience, they might have cut a lot of the stuff from SCTV that means the most to comedy writers
really?
today, because it wouldn't have gotten a big broad laugh, but it was stuff that, you know, some kid sitting in his bedroom was like, oh my god, that was written just for me, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a lot of my favorite stuff too.
Yeah.
I think with music too, you've got to write. You've got to write for yourself, right? In a way, I mean, you got to have the audience in mind. But when you're writing a song, when you're writing a sketch, when you're writing anything, you've got to have. If you know, you can't be like, well, other people think it's funny. I don't.
Right.
But I'm going to write this because I think some other people are going to think this is humorous.
Well, there's no investment in it at that point. I mean, it has to be coming from somewhere within you. I mean, I have no idea where humor comes from within me besides sadness from years ago.
Yeah.
You know? But, like, I mean, that's where... and I hope to God there's somebody out there writing comedy who's just, you know, I just love life, and this is funny to me. But I think most people, it comes from some kind of a sadness. But yeah, how could you write for just an... I mean, do you ever find yourself having to think about the audience when you're writing, or is it just for...
Oh, you know, I think it's usually, in a perfect world, it's stuff that we love that we also find a way to make it appealing to the audience too. But there have been things over the years where it's like, wow, they didn't really go for that, but I still love it. You know, I still love that bit. And other things, to be honest, there are days where we're writing jokes, particularly, let's say it's celebrity related or something, and we're not really, it's not something you're particularly proud of, but you're like, well, this hopefully will work.
Yeah.
But you don't go home and go, oh, I hope someone sees my Paris Hilton joke tonight, you know. You know, you hope someone sees a sketch you loved or something, but those aren't my least favorite stuff we've ever had to write is like celebrity related stuff. I'm not knocking it or complaining, because it's, you know, it's just part of the overall landscape of things. But my favorite kind of humor to write is at no one's expense. You know, it's not like, you know, you're attacking anybody. You know, even though some people definitely have it coming. I never minded going after Dick Cheney or something, or Karl Rove, or But some people definitely have it coming more than others. But I prefer stuff that's not even related to the headlines or related to any real person.
It just seems to come from the ether, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, just silly characters that have nothing to do with anyone who's really walking around on the planet, you know?
Yeah. I like the energy of the new show, and I don't want to harp on this show because I know it's not what we're here to talk about, but yeah, I'm sorry. I can't help it. It does feel like the original, the Johnny Carson Tonight Show, where I guess you guys don't have to get people drunk to make that show funny, but it seems, you know, to have the same energy as when everybody was trashed on the Carson show.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Well, thanks.
That, let's see. Trying to think here. I don't want to keep you here the whole day.
No, it's okay.
Let's see. Are there other musical acts that have anything even close to this impact that the Replacements did?
I think like, well, I always loved the humor that the Beatles had too. Like, you know, you watch Hard Day's Night, and you can tell they're as funny as they are brilliant musicians, and I think that humor was in their music. Lennon had an incredible wit, obviously, and I think that Keith Richards, you know, I just read his autobiography, Life, and it's amazing, and it feels like there's just this humor and almost like he's talking to you on the bar stool next to you. It's just all in his voice, and so I think, and Bob Dylan, I think Bob Dylan's humor, I don't think he gets enough credit for how funny some of his songs are, and again, like with Westerberger, Lennon, a lot of you get this guy who has a great sense of humor who can also just rip your heart out with the saddest song ever.
Yeah.
But I think it's that there's always that humor underneath it, that is there.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of my favorite songwriters over the years, R.E.M. always had a good sense of humor. I think that's true of so many of the musical artists I responded to, and like I said, John Worster, who plays drums for Superchunk, and Bob Mould and stuff, he's, absolutely hilarious. Like I would highly recommend people listening to Best Show Gems. You can get them on iTunes. It's just phone calls he would do to Tom Sharpling's radio show in character, and just hilarious stuff. So a lot of my favorite music has humor running underneath it, even if it's not always obvious in one particular song.
Sure.
I was going to ask something and I forgot. The title, Let It Be. Is that? Where did that?
Well, that actually came from their manager, Peter Jesperson, was a huge Beatles fan, and they decided to they love the Beatles too, but they said they picked Let It Be as a title just to show that nothing is sacred.
Oh, that's awesome.
The Beatles were just a great rock band.
That's awesome.
They weren't like God.
Sure.
So it's basically, and they were going to call their next album "Let It Bleed," the Stones album. But so they did it just as basically as a joke on their manager, just saying like, "Hey, I know we're not supposed to do this, but we're going to do this."
That's great.
Is there? It's actually making me think. Are there any sketches that you've written that were too dark for everybody's taste and just didn't because of that?
That's interesting. I once one time we used to do a bit called Guests We'll Never Have Back, and I had one of the guests. I wrote up a fake guest who was an old baseball player named Whitey Phelps, and it turns out he was a white supremacist, and that's why he was called Whitey Phelps. And Conan didn't know that, so he asked him about how he got his nickname, and I think things like, even though I had the audience booing him, and it was clearly not advocating racism, it was basically saying we didn't have him back because he's a bigot.
Yeah.
It was still a little touchy because race is one of those few areas that it's hard. Like that's why I'm a little shocked when I see early SNL with Richard Pryor, because they used to really push that envelope. But race these days, it's a hard thing to address, even if you're condemning the racist,
right?
Because people get so up on edge about it, and their hairs go up on their back, and they're, So that actually got cut, even though the writers liked it and stuff, because it just seemed a little too, a little disturbing or something. And I've had other things that were maybe too weird, or like I wrote a sketch once inspired by Orson Welles' film version of The Trial, the Kafka's The Trial.
Yeah.
And it's a great movie, but I wrote a really weird sketch that Conan and the other writers liked at rehearsal, and when we tried it on air, it literally... You heard nothing from the audience. Like it was like I would have liked it even if someone had said boo. It was they were just confused, and it was silent, and it was a reference to a movie nobody had seen.
Yeah.
And but we, it got through the rehearsal process because Conan liked it and we all enjoyed it. But it was too weird. It was just we had to pull it in editing because it was just too weird. But, once in a while, that was the nice thing about late nights. You could take some big swings sometimes, even if you just whiffed bad.
Yeah.
But, I can't think of anything else that was just flat out too dark.
Right.
My courage is at its peak. You know what I mean? How do you say you're okay? Don't answer the machine. Big time.
just as cathartic to write to you, or is it more cathartic to see it performed or to perform it?
You know, I think I would really miss the performing side of things if I was just a writer. I think because I came out of performing in improv, and one thing I always loved about improv was it was writing and performing. It was just spontaneous, but you didn't have the agony of sitting with a blank screen, and you're creating with other people. And one reason I always liked working at late night was it felt a little like the collaborative nature of it felt a lot like improv to me. Yeah, like where you're building on what someone else said, and trying to not write anything off or say no to something until you really give it a try. Like Paul Westerberg said, you know, he was talking about the Replacements music, but I think this is so true for comedy too. He said rock and roll is about mistakes and making those mistakes work for you. Yeah. And I think that in improv that's totally true. Like if you don't treat something as a mistake and you just roll with it and see what happens, and just treat it as like an opportunity. You know, that as corny as that sounds, a lot of my favorite stuff in comedy and in music seems to have come almost up by accident. Sure. You know? Yeah. Accidents that were embraced and not treated as mistakes. Yeah.
That happens. I was gonna. This is it's kind of off topic, but exactly what you were saying with mistakes. My band was playing a show one time, and the power strip was unplugged by me. I was jumping around acting like an idiot, and it got unplugged. So the guitar and the mics from the horn section were out, but the bass and the drum were still playing.
Gee, what kind of this band could this have been?
I know. The horn section. So there was this breakdown of the bass and the drums, and it worked so well that we kept it. We just wrote in this break with just the bass and the drums.
That's great.
Those mistakes, and it was like, yes, we arranged that perfectly.
That's awesome. That's like a lot of my favorite stuff. Yeah.
For you, Mike, has the music informed your comedy, or vice versa?
I just growing up, a lot of all the bands I listened to had a comedic bent to them. You know, I mean, I'm just a big fan of Dead Milkmen. We were talking about earlier, and that led me into punk, and so I'm just a big punk ska fan. So being a ska fan, you have bands like Real Big Fish and Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, where their songs, they're based on getting drunk and having fun. So there's so much comedy in all of that. So everything that I write musically has that behind it. And although I wouldn't say they're comedy songs, they're not Weird Al, they're not Garfunkel and Oates stuff, you know, which I love them. Tim Minchin, they're not that, but there's a comic element underneath everything. And not taking yourself seriously and realizing that life, there's so much funny about life. In the serious elements of your life, there's so much funny there.
You know, I don't think there's a musician I listen to that doesn't have a comedic element to them. I mean, Queen, They Might Be Giants, and XTC are probably the three top, and they've all got comedy. Yeah. Right. I would say XTC probably takes themselves more seriously than the rest of them, but
and I'm just a huge fan of punk. So I love what Westberg, what these guys did for the movement. But I'm not a big fan so much of the punk that's so serious that, I mean, I posted something recently. I tweeted something, and everyone's like, "Well, they're not a punk band," and I'm like, well, what's a punk band to you? It's, you know, that's what I don't like. It's like, why is it so serious that this is what real punk is about? This is what real music is about.
Wasn't punk supposed to be a rebellion anyway?
Exactly.
That's what comedy is.
Well, that's one of the reasons that the Replacements, one of the reasons I love them so much is they would mess with the rules within their own scene. Like Westberg said, you know, the punks would say, there are no rules anymore. And he's like, no, you guys do have rules. You're not supposed to play a guitar solo. You're supposed to play loud and fast. You can never play a slow song. You can never do that. You have to. And so he said they would deliberately mess with those rules to show them that there were rules. That basically that they were kidding themselves by saying there were no rules. So they would deliberately fly in the face of those rules just to show them.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's performance art. At its best, you know, and it's when I guess that's where things kind of bridge. I mean, sometimes performance art sounds pretentious, but a lot of great comedy, like a lot of what like Zach Galifianakis does, borders on not being stand up anymore. It's kind of like performance art, and like a lot of the Replacements, a lot of other bands that I can think of, they do exactly that. They're trying to make a point, trying to do something without being pretentious, and they kind of merge in that.
You reminded me. I can't talk about my band all the time. Sorry, I'm not trying to do this. No. But you reminded me earlier about when he would come out on stage and see the guys with a mohawk, so we'd play country music. Well, I used to think that we were just being assholes because when we'd play a show, we were a ska band, and we'd have 4 or 5 people on the lineup, and if they were all straight up 90s ska or reggae ska, we'd play the heaviest, hardest stuff we had. But if it was the opposite, we had a cover of I Touch Myself. If it was heavy, hard punk stuff, that we'd be playing I Touch Myself, and we had a cover of we did a cover of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme, you know. So we play that sort of stuff. But at the time, I thought I was being punk. I thought I was being an asshole. But you're looking back, and I think it was just because we were just trying to amuse ourselves. We were just trying to separate ourselves from that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't like try to please your audience,
Sure.
but I think when you're kind of just messing with them a little or making a kind of a funny point, sort of like I think that because I think. On the downside of, like, one downside to looking up to a band like The Replacements, though, is their tendency to kind of shoot themselves in the foot and sabotage themselves. A lot of my favorite comedians are not the best self-promoters, you know? Yeah. And, like, one of their songs, Treatment Bound, these things, we're getting nowhere as fast as we can. And, and I think there was a lot of that feeling in the improv community in Chicago, like, no industry attention.
Right.
You're just doing it because you love it, and but you're kind of secretly hoping someone will notice.
Right.
And so it's that ambivalence towards aspiring towards success, where you want it, but you're afraid of it. Sure, so you're afraid to take a chance and pursue it, because then you could get slapped down.
Yeah.
And someone could say, "Oh, you want this? Well, you can't have it."
Right.
And if you pretend like you don't want it, you can't get hurt.
Yeah, right, that's true.
And,
I've always been amazed, though, as being a long-form improv fan, of how there isn't... I mean, I say there's not a market, but there's never been a real successful... Other than the theaters themselves. The theaters themselves do well. You know, the UCBs do well, and probably with the theaters. But, like, when they try to do it on a television program or on a larger scale, it just doesn't seem... And to me, I don't understand why it doesn't translate. I know short form does, with
Whose Lines Did Anyone?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The short form
they had
stuff,
a round show for a little while too.
But the long form stuff just doesn't seem to translate.
It is almost like you really do kind of have to be in the room to appreciate it, and also when they've tried it, it always gets messed with in development. Like years ago, I had some friends that Improv Olympic, they got brought out to LA to try to do a long form TV project.
Oh, really?
And Del Close said before they even left, he goes, "They're going to fire your best people, they're going to tell you it's not funny enough and fast enough, and they're going to ruin everything you love about it." And that's exactly what happened.
Oh, wow.
And they and it's I think it's just one of those things where they're in development. There's going to be someone that says it needs to be faster, it needs to be, you need to have more laughs. And a lot of my favorite long form is patient, and everything that runs that's antithetical to television. And not that I anything against television, I love television, but short form, like Whose Line, you get that payoff of rapid fire suggestions and lines. It's no mystery to me why that works.
Yeah.
Feels like long form is it is watching a process, and that's part of. And that's why I actually have friends who have a big problem with improv. Period, because they feel like they're watching an ingredient, like they're eating an ingredient in a cake. Because improv is a skill you can use in acting, but they don't appreciate watching it develop as a sketch.
Well, there was an ongoing argument between Del Close and Bernie Sahlins, who's one of the early founders of Second City, and Bernie always saw improv as a means to creating sketches, like it was and Del said it was an art form in and of itself. And that's been an ongoing argument for many years. Some people think, no, it's just a technique for developing material. And other people say, no, it's an art form in and of itself.
Sure.
And I happen to think it's a great art form, but I can't argue with people that say it's not for them.
Yeah, some of the best, the funniest times, when I'm laughing the hardest, are when I go to some ASCAT shows that the last 15, 20 minutes of an hour and a half show that they've built, and then they just, towards the end of the show, when you've invested the time, and it's them on stage with the audience, and you guys together have made this, and this is why there's so much more invested in it to me, and it's at the end, it just builds. It's amazing to me. There's nothing greater to me. I don't know. I'm a nerd.
No, I feel the same way when there's nothing. I think back on some of my favorite long form shows I've seen or done, and it's nothing can compare. When it really works, there's nothing like a great long form show. And sometimes it doesn't, but when it really comes together, there's nothing like it in my experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer, but I would like. We usually end it. We ask the guest, you picked this album. Why would you recommend our audience listen to it?
Well, I don't think it's for everybody, but
Sure.
I think if you like kind of guitar based indie rock type music with a real sense of humor and a real sense of I guess the combination of funny and sad, that if you like that in a lot of your favorite comedy, whether it's Arrested Development or Cheers or Party Down or old movies that you love, I think it might be worth a listen, because I think it's got a wonderful combination of funny and sad, and it's just a great rock album if you like that kind of music. Yeah. It's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it might be worth a listen if that kind of combination of stuff appeals to you.
I think it's worth it for anybody out there, because our goal with this podcast is to get people to listen to stuff they've never listened to before. And if they have been a person, I'd like to think that there's a little person out there who's listened to every album we've told them to listen to. If that's you, take a break, listen to some music. Don't just listen to like quote unquote strict comedy. Give yourself a break. Listen to something else that's got the same elements in it. Is there anything that you would like to plug, Brian? Anything that's coming up?
Let me think. I did a little part on Eagle Heart in one of the upcoming episodes that my friends Michael Coleman and Andrew Weinberg produced, and that was a real thrill for me, because Chris Elliott's one of my comic heroes, and he couldn't have been nicer. It's so nice when you meet a hero that turns out to be everything you hoped and more,
Awesome.
And so I would, if people haven't seen that show, I would definitely recommend seeing it, not just because I did a little part in it. It was just a great show, and just like Delocated, another show. John Glazer, who used to write with us at Conan, obviously created that show, and I think it's amazing. And we're going to be doing a week of shows, I think, Conan shows in Chicago in June, which I'm excited about, because that's going home.
Sure.
But that's about it. Also, I usually do the first Sunday every month at UCB. I do a show called Gravid Water. If people haven't seen that, that's a lot of fun.
If I can, this is the best show I see at UCB. It is the best show I see. My GOAT monthly. It is amazing.
Thanks, Mike.
I love it. It's wonderful.
It's my favorite show to do. There's an actor and an improviser on stage, and the actors memorize lines from a play, and the improviser doesn't know what the hell the play is. And I do also every other Thursday, I do a show called Joel Murray and Friends at IO West. A lot of fun. Other old Chicago friends, and we just did it the other night. And but yeah, I think that's about it. And I really appreciate you having me do this.
Of course, this is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I will quickly plug, because I rarely have anything to plug. I'm going to be Hans Gruber in Die Hard: A Drinking Game on the 25th of this month, which is a Saturday. So
where do you do that?
At Next Stage Theater, a really tiny black box in Hollywood.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It might be
fun.
sold out already.
Everyone goes and gets drunk, and the
including the
actors.
actors.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
These are all we give out kits at every show, and so these are all the I've some of them, like a very year-old Baby Ruth needs to be thrown away. But they're, oh God, and there's an old marshmallow from a year ago too. So there are things in there that need to be thrown away. But yeah, every week, once a month, we get together. We just do a stage reading, and yeah, I'm going to be Hans Gruber. It's going to be fun.
That's great.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
So that's a movie I'll never get tired of.
Right?
Die Hard.
Right? It's going to be great. Well, thank you guys for listening, and thank you, Mike, for being here.
Thanks.
And thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and have a good thing. Comedy on Vinyl is recorded at Fort Awesome Studios in beautiful downtown Burbank, California. Our producer is Mike Worden, our host is Jason Klamm, and he's also the editor. Comedy on Vinyl is a Stolen Dress entertainment production. You can check out all of our other podcasts, books, videos, other audio stuff, probably some writing, at stolendress.com. And please check out Comedy on Vinyl at facebook.com/Comedy on Vinyl, twitter.com/Comedy on Vinyl. And please subscribe to us on iTunes, rate us highly, and spread the word. Thank you so much for listening to Comedy on Vinyl this week, and have a very good thing.
I can lick the meat that's true. The overall mistress must be